So three, two, one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Talk With. I'm here with Adam Martin.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Hello. I'm Adam Martyn. I'm an actor, a content creator, as my Twitter bio says. Well, not today. I'm normally a Sonic the Hedgehog lookalike as well with my spiky hair, but it's gotten a bit too long, as you can see, so I've had to sweep it back. But yeah, mainly an actor, a big Doctor Who fan. Yeah, just making my way through the world as we all are.
Yeah, because the few times I've met you in person, your hair has defied gravity. It
Yeah.
defies like everything. I mean, it's impressive. I'm incredibly jealous, but yeah.
Thank you.
So glad to have you on the podcast. For everyone watching. Um, I currently have the flu, so if you do hear me coughing, as I'm probably about to, it's because I have the flu.
There we go. That's everyone's full disclaimer and proof that you have the flu. So
Mm. Right. So, how are you? How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're recording this in November, getting close to Christmas. I haven't done any Christmas shopping. It's slightly daunting with each day.
Mm.
But it's hard. I mean, well, one, I think it gets harder to buy presents for, people that you care about every year, especially when you get older, I think. And then also just with life, acting stuff, regular work stuff. Do you know what I think though? Buying for Doctor Who fans is easy because
Oh
you just get
yeah,
anything with
yeah.
like the Doctor Who logo on it and you're sorted. But for like just general non-big Who fan people, it's like, oh god, this is actually really difficult.
I mean, my family always say that it's kind of easy, kind of not easy to buy for me, because while I'll take anything with Dr. Hill in it, it's whether I have it or not. That's the problem.
That's the conundrum. Yeah,
Mm.
I remember one year when I was a bit younger. I think I was in like the final phase of getting all the classic Who DVDs at the
Mm.
time, and I remember a family member when I saw them before Christmas was like, they said, "Oh, do you want me to get you any classic Who DVDs?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "Don't bother." I was like, "That's a minefield in itself." I was like, and like you say, the worst thing you'd want as well is to open it, realize you have it, and then do the feigned surprise thing of being like, oh, like, thanks so much, and then knowing in your heart of hearts you're gonna take it into
Yeah.
like CEX next week to get like, do you know what I mean? It's
Oh,
it
I
is
know
difficult.
the exact kind of, yeah, the kind of performance there. I mean, it's got to be one of your best performances ever. I mean, you can't, in your mind, you can't let them down. You gotta know you gotta let them know how grateful you are for this gift.
Yeah,
And
what I try and do now is like, because obviously I'm a bit older now. I think it's very much when you're younger, and it is like the temptation's there, like to go, oh, like thank. But now I try my best if it's something I've already got, just to be upfront and just say
mm,
like, oh, I've already got. I appreciate the sentiment. I do, and do you know what I find most people say, oh, don't worry, like I've got the receipt, so you can swap it. Do you know what I mean? I think people are
yeah.
more understanding if we're just upfront. But I get it's hard because like it's
Oh
that
yeah.
rush, isn't it? You see it, you go, "Oh, I've already got it, but I've got to be nice." But yeah, I think there's, yeah, any Who fans out there, if you get, I don't know, if you get what's this Who story? If you get
Space
Nightmare in
pirates.
Eden or the Space Pirates, yeah, if you get the Space Pirates for the 10th time, don't be sad, just be grateful.
I mean, I don't understand why they'd buy you the space pirates 10 times in a row, but
No, why would
uh,
anyone do that?
yeah, yeah. I haven't really given Christmas much thought this year, actually, so far. I mean, I always kind of leave it till December. It's always
Yeah,
been kind of. I don't like really discussing it or with friends or like family like it's
yeah,
now like
yeah.
preparing for the future, that's great. Preparing to get gifts now, brilliant. But when like you hear Christmas song in a shop or you see Christmas adverts in November, it's just more, it's not Christmas yet, that's the thing.
Yeah, no, I'm the same as you. For me, December 1st, then we can start saying it's Christmas. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean on another note, I mean of course, one thing I want to bring up is your podcast, well, you and Philip's podcast about Red Dwarf.
yes, yes, yeah.
Um, and I'm a huge Red Dwarf fan myself.
Oh, nice.
Absolute huge Red Dwarf fan, and I know you got into the series through Everyone Is Dead, Dave. I was
Yes.
wondering if you just talk about your experience with that and your experience so far.
Yeah, so as you say, for anyone who might not be aware, myself and another creator called Philip Hawkins, we run a Red Dwarf podcast called Everybody's Dead, Dave, and we're going through the series from the very first episode up till it's the Promised Land, isn't it? The most recent one at the
Yeah,
time of
yeah.
broadcast, and the whole catch of it is Phil, of course, has been watching since the 90s, since the heyday, whereas I'd barely even heard of Red Dwarf before, which as a Doctor Who fan must sound terrible. Because I think a lot of us fans are fascinated with quirky British
Mm,
sci-fi or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I had heard of Red Dwarf, but I'd only ever seen like a couple of pictures, maybe. I certainly hadn't seen any episodes before, not in full. So when Phil asked me to do this, I was like, yeah, do you know what? Get into it. And do you know what? It's been a blast. I was a bit nervous before with any new show, because of
yeah.
course Phil loves it, and he was like, "Oh, there's all these good moments, and there's these," and I'm like, "Right, yeah, okay, like I'm hearing you." But no, I mean, right from the word go, like I think the humor's very British, but very funny.
Mm.
The lead cast are Craig
Oh, they're
Charles,
brilliant.
Chris Barry, Danny John Jules, and Robert Llewellyn are just like superb as a quadruple. I was going to say quadruple trio. That makes no sense. As a leading cast, they're very good. And yeah, it's been fascinating to see like the evolution of the show as well, especially between it had the original run that ended in the
Mm.
late 90s, then you had that 10-year break, and just to see how different it is. In It's weird because like
Yeah.
when we're recording this, we're just about to start series 11, which
Mm.
is so we've got series 11, series 12, then the Promised Land, and that's it for now. But already the difference from the first eight, you know what I mean? Like it's same
Yeah.
that the dynamic between the four of them is still there. They've got that chemistry still, but of course you've had such a leap in like special effects, the sets, the kinds of stories they can tell, and at the moment I kind of prefer that original like 1 to 8 style where a lot of them
Yeah.
were just self-contained on Red Dwarf itself. Because then I think you can focus on the comedy more. Because sometimes the epicer episodes they are cool and they're epic,
Mm.
but sometimes I've found like the comedy's fallen a bit short. So I think at the moment, series 1 to 8 for me are like that's the Red Dwarf I like the most. But no, I'm curious to see where series 11, 12, and the Promised Land go.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Red Dwarf myself.
Mm.
I watched it with my dad every so often, like we'd watch it all throughout. And I actually watched Series 10 live when it was when it returned because
Oh right.
I wasn't alive during the 90s, so obviously I didn't watch all of that live. But
Yeah.
I kind of grew up with it with my dad, and he was introducing me to it. And then Series 10, I mean, I agree. I totally agree that series series 1 to I'd probably I I love I don't love series 7 and 8, but I do hold them kind of guilty pleasures in a way. They're not great.
Yeah.
Series 8, I wouldn't say it's great. Series 7's good, I'd say. It's not the worst thing ever. Series 8 is a bit it's a bit well, it's Series 8, but I think but I do hold a lot of nostalgia for Series 10 myself from my perspective. So I think that's great, but I think you're completely right. You've hit the nail on the head there. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Series 11 and up until the Promised
And
Land.
beyond. Well,
Yeah.
I'll be like you if they decide to make another new series. I'll be
Mm,
I'll be sure to watch. But again, I don't know what the state of it is. I mean, again,
yeah.
obviously no spoilers, but from what I've read, the Promised Land was 2020, I think,
Yeah, it
and
was.
I don't know if they've like announced or discussed like, oh, we're gonna do another full series, or are we just gonna do like specials like the Promised Land? I don't know if you know any more on that as to
I
like
think I
if
read an
anything's been
article
discussed.
somewhere of the possibility of it happening. So
Mm,
I'll have to look more into it. So it might be. I hope so, because it'll be interesting to see where they take it now. We've
yeah.
entered because of course 2020. I mean, that must have been filmed more in 2019. So now that we've entered a kind
Yeah.
of a new decade, it'd be interesting to see where Red Dwarf kind of fits now and where it kind of takes the story. I mean, the Promised Land was really good. It was good. So I can't wait to hear
Okay.
your thought on that.
That's
I
good. That's
I
good.
I did enjoy that. Um, but yeah, I think my favorite episode of Red Dwarf ever. I think the one. it might not be my favorite. The one that stuck in my mind since I was a kid was probably Quarantine.
It's so
Quarantine
funny.
is so
Yeah.
like etched into my brain. I think I was terrified as a kid watching that. I think I at some like watches I had to walk out the room. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's but and there was also was it Legion? Legion. That's also
Yes.
one that's in my mind a lot. I was wondering if you've developed any favorites yet, or if you're saving that for kind of the finale of the
Well,
podcast.
we did do a ranking video,
Oh
me and
yeah.
Phil. And we did, when did we do this? We did this after, I think we did this after we finished Series 8. I think it was before we covered Back to Earth.
Yeah,
And
because I have watched
yeah,
that, but I've completely forgotten what your number one was.
oh, it's all right. But I mean, it's funny. Both of our number ones, I'm sure, were Quarantine. I think it is
Mm,
just, it's the peak of like the Red Dwarf style of humor. All four of them are like firing off on all cylinders. And I think going through it, Series 5, that was that people tend to say, is it between like Series 3 and 6? People say that's like that's like the peak of Red Dwarf, like they're the
yeah.
best years, so to speak. And some other favorites, see, one interesting one that this was my number two, but for Phil, this was way down on his list. Was Meltdown, the series 4 finale,
Yeah.
with
Oh,
all like the
yeah.
wax
The
figures. So you've
wax.
got like Elvis Presley and
Yeah,
all the
that one's
others.
also in my mind a lot of the time. It's probably
Yeah.
one of my favorites as well, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that was an example of like the epicer episodes that I thought actually really worked. Like everything
Mm,
just came together. But then on the opposite of that, my number three is Marooned from series 3, where it's just Lister and Rimmer marooned, as it were, and just
mm.
seeing it's an old formula, but put two people in a space where they can't leave and they have to survive. What do they do? But again,
Yeah.
I think they tackle that in a very Red Dwarf way.
Mm.
So those are my top three as it stands. So Marooned at 3, Meltdown at 2, and then Quarantine. That sounds like what happened. That was me basically during the first lockdown in the pandemic. Marooned, I had a meltdown, then I had to quarantine.
How was your pandemic? Because I've asked that to a few people, but how did your pandemic go? Because I know the podcast Everyone Has Said Dave was kind of started around that time.
It
So
was.
did that kind of give you something more to do in a way?
It did. It's very mixed feelings, especially on that very first lockdown that we had. So between like March and August of 2020,
Mm,
because obviously like the huge negative was the impact it had on the world, on all of us individually. People who lost loved ones and all that. But for myself on an individual level, I think that first lockdown I actually really appreciated in a way, because as an actor, like you're constantly looking for work. You
mm,
can be constantly busy moving from one project to the next, and acting is never usually your one project. You're trying to straddle a regular job as well, and you're traveling around. So actually, just being told you've got to you're not going anywhere for a few months, I actually kind of appreciated that sort of pause in life. And I've heard a lot of people say, I mean, you might have done by asking people, that like those first few months, I think a lot of people sort of thought, oh, you know what, yeah, we can just stop and like
mm.
take it easy and relax. And um obviously YouTube wise, I think without without it locking us all down, I don't think I would have made half the friends or half the people I know, like probably yourself included, because I got very active on Twitter during that
Mm.
first lockdown as well, as a lot of us did.
Yeah.
And obviously doing Everybody's Dead Dave again, that was Phil suggesting the idea. We don't record as regularly anymore because life and all that, but in lockdown we were recording every week, sometimes 2 episodes. Do you know what I mean? Because everyone had the time, like,
Mm.
and asking guests, you'll know, for your own podcast, especially during
Oh yeah. Yeah.
2020 2021, more people, regardless of who they were inclined to say yes because they weren't doing anything else. So yeah, I guess from a creative standpoint and a personal standpoint, that first lockdown in particular was quite good for me. And I know I'm not trying to say that sounds selfish or anything, but like
Oh no,
I
I
appreciated having that time. But then as it went on, as a lot
yeah.
of us found, it became a bit, I think we all had that time to recharge, and then people wanted to
Mm.
get back out there. And there was all those horrible stories about, people, I can't remember basically, when you get like cabin fever, being somewhere
Yeah.
in too long, there was like lots of that. And I'm glad we're finally coming out of it now. I know COVID's still around, but yeah, no, my pandemic was mixed, I suppose. Creatively, it was great, but personally, good to start with, and then it faltered off?
Mine was probably exactly the same, really. That's exactly how I described mine. I mean, I actually started YouTube more or less in 2020,
Yeah,
and I kind of I was going to take a very different route to what I'm taking now, especially with uni now and the subjects I've chosen, the creative media industry.
of course.
And with what happened in the pandemic, I really kind of figured out that everything I was doing kind of before wasn't who I wanted to be, wasn't who I
Yes.
was, just not me. And it was, and then I kind of started, kind of threw myself into audio making, and then kind of self-taught myself as I went along. Um, then I think the first pandemic was the first kind of lockdown. As you mentioned, I feel like it was great creatively. It gave
Yeah.
me a lot of time with my family, which was great. Because and doing because I was in college at the time,
Mm.
and now I'm in uni now. But when being in college during that time, it could be stressful sometimes because I was doing creative media film course,
Yeah.
which a lot of that's studio based and a lot of that's kind of how about with cameras and stuff, and
Yeah.
so we couldn't really do that in the within I think that was more or less the second lockdown that kind
Mm.
of happened. And so we kind of they gave us kind of replacements. So suddenly we were writing blogs and
Okay.
doing live streams are pretty fun, but it
They
just
are, but they're a nightmare at the same time, aren't
oh
they?
yeah. Yeah, completely. I mean I'm trying I came up with an idea to plan a charity live stream soon. I'm hoping to do
Oh,
which would
nice.
be pretty fun. So I look forward to that. But and then we also did podcasting, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So we kind of did during the pandemic while at college we kind of did like stuff that we could do at home pretty much.
Mm.
And then they kind of did the 1 week in, 1 week off, and
Yeah.
then yeah, it was an interesting time to be, you know, to be a student, I'd say.
Oh, it
Uh,
certainly was.
mm, but I'm glad it gave me more time with my family. On the other hand, though, it was like the third or second pandemic. Uh I mean I had COVID earlier this year.
Mm.
My dad got it last year. Uh yeah, so overall it was interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time to be alive.
It'll be funny in like 20, 30 years when people, study this time and like the pandemic and all the different facets. Because like you said, it depending on like what your like circumstances were, where you were based, everyone had a completely different experience with the pandemic. So
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean one thing unrelated to the pandemic that I wanted to ask you about is uh you kind of your channel is very much revolves around the idea of kind of television in general, really. And
sure, yeah.
I love how informal it is and how well structured it all is. And I like your videos on idents in particular.
Oh,
I
thank you.
I just wanted to get your kind of perspective on your own content and how you kind of got into your love for TV.
It's it's really funny because I mean, I've always been fascinated by TV. I think I was one of the last because I was born in 1996, and I think we
Mm,
were one of the last, maybe not the last, but one of the last generations who I think growing up, we grew up predominantly with television. Now I guess it's a lot of, tablets and all that sort of stuff. But so TV was like a big thing for me. That whole, it's the
yeah.
cliche, running home from school to make sure you didn't miss your favorite program because no one in the family could work the VCR properly and stuff like. Do you know what I mean? So I grew up with that sense of TV was important to a degree,
Mm,
and I don't in terms of like idents in history. I mean, history's always been a passion. Like if I always say if I wasn't an actor, I'd probably be a historian. Like I
yeah.
loved history through school. I loved like reading
Same
books
here.
about
Yeah.
yeah, like just different time periods and but then when I was about 12 or 13 I got into like the history of like technology. So like I one of like my side passions is like video game history. Like I found that fascinating, and then that extended to like I don't know, like phones, computers, and then TV. And like with in corresponding with YouTube, like when I started my channel, well, I've recently technically celebrated 10 years since I made the channel. I made it back in 2012. But that, it is now, but it was always just a hobby. I just
Mm,
made whatever I wanted. It was like, oh, look how my Doctor Who DVD collection's growing, or look at the vinyl records I have. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't a structure, there wasn't a theme. It was just I'm gonna post a video about what I want. And then I think it all changed with the television stuff. In 2016, I made a short documentary, a 10-minute documentary on the history of the five main British TV channels. So for anyone who doesn't know, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, and Channel 5. Just very short, like here's how they came into being, because I've always found that fascinating. And then since there, it just expanded. And with idents, I've always just found them fascinating. It sounds, but the amount of times people go, "What's an ident?" But the minute you explain what it is, they go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." Because we all see them, don't we? It's
mm,
before every program.
yeah.
But I've always found like how they're created, and of course, I grew up in the era of this is getting really niche now. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to get a Wikipedia page up. But BBC Two in particular um, was running idents when I was really small, with that had a lot of like personality to them, and
Mm,
it showed their numeral, the two, in like a lot of different scenarios. So one it'd be like a bunch of cygnets following a swan, or it would be a like a Venus flytrap, or it'd be
yeah.
anything. And
I
I
think
I think as a child I was like, that's so cool that this thing is different every time, and I think it just grew from there. So
I think
um
the most infamous one of those two idents that pretty much every Whovian will know about is the Dalek one, of course.
of
Which I
course,
think I
yes.
know someone who has the remote control for that Dalek and the Dalek
Oh,
itself.
oh
Um
snap.
and I based my intro off it as well.
Yes,
My intro
that's
to
right.
yeah,
Yes,
and the
I've seen it.
small
Yeah.
I've got the Dalek up there actually. I'll grab it real quick.
Oh, do so. Yeah.
It's not the same colors, but it's kind of based
Let's
on
go.
a wilderness year's Dalek.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I've also
That's
got the
so cool.
postbox one up there, from the CBBC ident, which is
Yes, I know the one you mean. That's
yeah,
so
which is
sick.
one I grew up with that I absolutely adored. If I grab that, the eyes falling out, but here it is. There we go.
Yes. Oh, that's mad.
Because yeah, I was always absolutely obsessed with history as well. I mean, in my sorry,
You're all right.
in my secondary, in particular, that was where I kind of learned my passion for history, and we studied the Normans and the Battle of Hastings, which
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. British medicine through time,
Mm,
and what else did we study? And a few other things. It feels like quite a while ago now, even though it wasn't that long ago. But
yeah.
I was fascinated by it all, and you know, it was probably it was the highest grade I got was in history.
Yeah.
So if I probably wasn't going down the path I was going down now, I'd probably go into history as well. I'm even incorporating it into my uni work, because we have to kind of write a final kind of assessment piece, a kind of research
Mm,
based uh document and around a specific subject of our choice, but it has to be kind of ethics based. And
yeah.
I've linked it to Doctor Who because that's what I know, and it's kind of the glorification of historical figures
Yeah.
in like Doctor Who and such. So like Winston Churchill, Queen Victoria, Nikola Tesla, they all
Yes.
weren't
Yeah.
they all weren't that they all weren't great people. Not gonna
Nope.
lie, they were not great people. So like it's interesting. I mean, even Charles Dickens, even though it's kind of mentioned in the story for a bit, it's glossed over. So I think that'll be particularly interesting to do. But
And for anyone like us who's interested, I guess, coming to a program like Doctor Who is a gold mine, because like, the amount of times they delve back into history anyway. So then, the amount as a kid, like you say, whether it was Charles Dickens or William Shakespeare or who it
mm,
was, after watching it, I'd often think, right, now I've got to go and find out more about that period.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember when growing up, my dad would always remind me that Winston Churchill was not a nice guy, not a nice guy whatsoever. And I'm glad he
No,
did
not a
because
nice man.
I'm glad he did tell me about that because if you watched all TV and movies, it doesn't really give you that insight. And I look forward to covering it in with my uni work. Really,
Yeah,
it'll be interesting.
absolutely.
But I grew up with a lot of TV as well. I mean, I always ran back for Doctor Who, but primarily most of my memories of like running back home would be the Sarah Jane adventures.
Yes,
Because
yeah, of
like
course.
I would be dashing back from school just to get there in time, and I turn all the lights off, shut the curtains, make
Yeah.
sure proper experience. And I have so many fond memories of watching that live, and Wizards versus Aliens as well. That was kind of the thing after Sarah Jane. Ooh, you've frozen on my screen. I think that's my Wi-Fi being a bit unstable there.
Oh, no worries. Hang
No,
on.
I got
No
you now. I got you.
problem. Am I
Yeah,
back? Am I
you're
back?
back. You're back.
Yeah, no worries. I always feel bad with Sarah Jane Adventures because like because when it started, when was it?
Oh, you've frozen again. Hang on. I think it is my Wi-Fi. I think could be.
No,
Oh, you're back now. Back. Oh, are
the
you?
end. Just
There you go. Oh,
are we back?
yeah, just about. It's kind of freezing a bit here and there.
I'm just checking my internet, doing a speed check. Yeah, mine seems to. Are you
Oh,
frozen on my end?
oh, am I
Oh dear.
back? Am I back?
Yes, you are. You are. You're back.
Yeah, you're a bit pixelated on my screen, but you're back as far as I can. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I've just done a quick internet speed test. Mine seems to be okay.
Ah,
Uh,
I think mine's a bit unstable. That's the one of the many positives
uh,
of living as a uni student is you get sometimes you
oh
get great
yes,
Wi-Fi, sometimes you just it's not my day. But yeah,
I
anyways, as you
remember
were
it
saying.
well. So yeah, Sarah Jane Adventures. When it started, I was 11, and I watched all of series one. I remember that, and I think I watched all of series two because that was when it swapped from being Maria to Rani,
Ronnie,
right?
yeah. Yep.
Was that series two? Yeah. And then series three came along, and I was 13, and I hate saying it now. I think because it was on CBBC, and you know what it's like growing up in Britain, right? I think
Yeah.
everyone reaches that age where, amongst like your friends and that, you sort of grow out of CBBC, and it's like it's not cool to watch CBBC anymore.
Mm,
And I think, to be honest, for series two, I was probably pushing it because like I was at high school by then. And I think honestly, it's not that I didn't want to. I think it was a mix of like no one else watched CBBC then, and also like we just did other things. Like I was spending more time instead of rushing home. Like you were going somewhere after school with your mates, like whether you were
mm,
going like bowling or do you know what I mean? So that
yeah.
I got to that age where running home to catch a program wasn't like the top thing of my agenda anymore. It was more about socializing and hanging out. Obviously, in hindsight, I'm gutted because I missed the wedding of Sarah Jane. I
Mm,
missed Death of the Doctor, and all those great stories in between. I think the last one I watched was the opener of series five. Is that Sky?
yeah, that's Sky.
Yeah, because I think didn't that start airing after Liz Sladen passed away, bless her soul.
Yes,
Um,
I
so I
did.
think after that, I sort of went out of my way to watch it.
Mm,
But I still, amazingly, we were saying earlier about collecting old Doctor Who DVDs. For whatever reason, I don't own the complete Sarah Jane box set, and I don't know why. And the amount of times I've gone into HMV and looked at it and gone, yeah, I'll buy that at some point. But of course, in the high street, they want, I think, a bit of an inflated price for it. So
mm,
at some point, dear viewer, I will go back. I will rewatch it all,
mm.
because there's people like yourself, people I guess a few years younger than me who, like say, who really grew up with Sarah Jane Adventures and who know it inside out. And I want to see all those cool stories you all bring up every now and then.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely worth it. I mean, I absolutely love the show. I think uh and that's not just based on my nostalgia for it. I think it's genuinely some of the most well-written stuff in Doctor Who. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
I think something that harkens back to the dynamic you and Philip have in an awful lot of running. While I'm here at uni, I'm showing my friends for the first time, my flatmates, Doctor Who. and we watched
Ah,
we he did not know anything about the show.
yeah.
Before we watched the show, he thought the Daleks were the Doctor's friends, like R2D2 in His Nuts. But he knew absolutely nothing about
Oh
the show.
wow. Okay.
And so
Yeah.
it makes it really easy to lie to them. Like at one point I said like the Time Lords were only classic characters. They don't come back. They're just referenced. After
Yeah.
Dalek, I
Yeah.
said there was only one Dalek, and in the series one finale, the reason the Dalek's in the thumbnail there is because of flashbacks, stuff like that, really.
Yeah.
Um, and so we got through. We're on series 4 now.
Yeah.
But we've also watched Torchwood. Um, and we've watched series 1, 2, and Children of Earth now. We were watching it
Just
in
stop there. You can
release.
stop there.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't, you don't,
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't need,
I decided we're stopping there.
do
It's
you
a
know
great
what?
ending.
Torchwood is again when it was on, I was too young because it's I
Same there.
was I was I would have been 10 when series 1 was on. And I think I remember trying to wangle it with my parents, being like, "Oh, it's a Doctor Who show, like with Captain Jack and all that."
Yeah.
Okay. Night before, they either saw a trailer or read something in like the TV guide that was like, this is like, 15 plus, it's got swearing, it's got sex and all that. And they were like, yeah, you're not watching that. So Children of Earth was the first one I watched on broadcast. So I felt awful
Christ.
because I had no, like, any callbacks. I was like, I have no idea what this is referring to. Like, obviously, by then we'd had series 4, so I knew who Gwen and Yanto were at least. But any callbacks, like to Owen and Tosh, I was like, I don't know
Yeah.
who they are. Anything referred to at all in series 1 or 2, I was like, I don't know who that is or what's going on. And then I remember I love Children of Earth because it's great. And then when Miracle Day came on, I was actually 15 then, so I was like, right, I'll watch Miracle Day, and I didn't really like it,
That's
and
fair.
I only watched series 1 and 2 of Torchwood in lockdown, funnily enough.
Mm.
And again, there's so many good episodes in it. I was like, wow, I was missing out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been interesting showing them to my flatmate in particular. I mean, I've got a group of flatmates who come in and watch it. One is very versed in the world of Torchwood, and they were absolutely broken when, of course, Yanto, sadly passes. Uh, and it was very interesting seeing their reactions for the first time. I mean, especially for day one, not Children of Earth day one, episode 2, day one, series 1.
Uh,
That was
yes,
that was an interesting watch. It was probably the most cathartic, just absolute chaos watching of that
yeah.
episode. Like we got some of my sister's friends came around. We all sat around the TV and watched day one. And it was and then Cyberwoman, of course, which to be fair, I find
Oh,
is a good story, terrible costume.
yeah,
Terrible
I
costume.
agree. I think I tweeted it out at the time because, I think when you're going into Torchwood series 1 and 2 as late as I did, 15
Yeah.
years late or whatever, there was always, what was it, the sex gas and cyber war. You hear about those things and you're like, right, okay, yeah, I think you go in
Yeah.
with a certain amount of, oh, right, here we go. But yeah, Cyberwoman surprised me actually. Like I say, terrible costume.
Oh yeah, I think the
But
worst thing about that costume for me, the only thing that you could create some plot reasons for the rest of it, but the cyber heels, the fact that the Cyberwoman has heels, really just that's the one thing that I just think makes no sense within the
yeah,
plot or anything. I mean, you could probably get away with at least explaining that was a half conversion gone
yeah.
wrong, blah blah blah. But the
Shred,
heels,
shreds the immersion just a little bit, just a little bit. But yeah. But on spin-offs, what do you think of Class?
oh, good question. I really enjoyed it on first viewing, I think.
Yeah,
I remember being absolutely shocked by the finale, when, the surprise opening, with
yes,
Ram's
yeah,
dad and such. It was completely shocking. I mean, the second episode creeped me out. I liked how they were trying experimental concepts with each episode.
yeah.
I know that's kind of something that a lot of people have issue with is that they never really settled on one thing. But I
Mm.
found that particularly interesting, and I think it made for an interesting watch, at least.
Yeah, I think why not experiment? And the only thing I didn't like, majorly, from what I remember. I do need to rewatch it actually, but
Mm.
the one thing I remember not liking majorly was sometimes there were some scenes where they try and write teenagers, and it's the
Yeah.
classic adults writing teenagers. And because well, no, I wasn't a teen, but because I'd recently been a teenager, as you'll know, you sort of watch it and you go, like, no one says that. And
No.
I know it's really hard because like teen culture's moving all the time,
Oh
like,
yeah, constantly.
like phrases people use, how they interact. And I truly, not that, I doubt you'd see they'd ever let actual teenagers write television for various reasons, but I think it's so difficult for adults to write about, especially they were trying to do like current teenagers. If you're doing it
Yeah.
in a time period, that's different, because if you're an adult who was a teenager in the 80s, then you've got a wealth of knowledge on how people like dressed, spoke, whatever. But if
Yeah.
you're an adult who's in their 40s trying to write about teens in 2016, it worked for the most part. I was surprised that I didn't like cringe as much as I thought I would, because when they
Mm.
announced it, it was like, oh, it's set in Coal Hill School. It's a bunch of like 16-year-olds. I was like, oh boy, here we go.
Yep.
But no, on the whole, like I didn't cringe all that much. There was only like one or two clunkers in there.
And we're back. So, we were just discussing Class, of course. It was particularly interesting that spin-off, as I mentioned, with all the experimental aspects of it. I also liked Capaldi's cameo as well. I felt like that
Yes.
fit. But I'm interested by what you were saying about like adults writing teenagers. I think you're completely right. You've hit the nail on the head there. It's interesting, but I feel like that's kind of where Sarah Jane Adventures and Class kind of differ, because while
Mm.
Class does have some of those faults that you mentioned sometimes, I feel like Sarah Jane Adventures kind of has that timeless feel to it.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
instead of focusing on them at the time, of course you get some things that might be a bit more cringy nowadays that you probably couldn't
Mm.
write nowadays. I feel like it still works because it's not kind of. I think Sarah Jane Adventures focus more on the human element than the fact
Yes.
that
Yeah.
these are teenagers. They put them in stories that explore them as more grounded, more three-dimensional characters than just writing for teenagers,
Yeah.
just
No, for
writing them as
sure.
solely for the fact that they are teenagers. Which of course that's Class is fairly successful in that as well, in writing them as
Mm.
more three-dimensional than just these are teenagers, you're supposed to relate to them. These are present day teenagers to be precise. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's what Sarah Jane Adventures does right. And yeah.
Yeah. I guess Sarah Jane is more like you say, timeless, just a timeless adventure featuring children. Um, or teenagers, if you like. Whereas
Mm.
Class was very, that was a teen drama, set in a
Yeah.
high school, just with aliens and monsters and all that good stuff. And as I say, I think it's one of the better ones recently in terms of writing. Like you said, everyone's a three-dimensional character. Everyone has something to do. It's
Mm.
fleshed out. And I've heard that the Class box sets from Big Finish are meant to be very good. I haven't listened to them yet,
I've
but it's
listened
on my
to
to-do
a
list.
few of them, and I specifically love the one with Ace in it, of course, because it's
Yes, of
Ace, and
course.
who doesn't love Ace in anything really?
I was going to say in anything. So
I mean, yeah, I love what they've done with it. I hope it's not a continuation of what we saw on screen.
hmm.
It's more stories that take place during series one, or like that kind of timescale, which is interesting because it in like if you just watch it as one series, it feels like a short amount of time. Doesn't feel
Mm.
like you could fit that many stories in it, but
Yeah,
they do surprisingly well with what they have, and it's an interesting direction.
no, for sure.
I don't know what the story with the new one. They're releasing another volume, and I've noticed it has the Shadow
It
King
does.
in the cover, which to me at least suggests um some like more tie-in either
Mm.
to the first series or a continuation. I'm not sure if it's continuation, of course. I do hope they get to it one day, though, or they get the.
Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, if anyone watching this is a fan of Class, I know in the press release for the new one that's coming out in January, I think, they're just saying like, we were happy to do more, but if you want more, then go and support them, go and buy it, go and
Hmm.
download it. Yeah, so that's out January next. I'm not endorsed by Big Finish, by the way. They haven't paid me to talk about this, but do you know what I mean? I think Big Finish, as they always have, they've played that crucial role, especially when Doctor Who wasn't on the air, of like
Yeah,
providing new material with the original actors. But I think, there are some people, and I've come to Big Finish late. I've been a fan of Doctor Who since 2005, but I didn't start listening to Big Finish until about 2020, actually, during the lockdown.
yeah,
And I guess that was, a few things like, when you're growing up, money is a thing. And then back then when it was mainly CD, having like a CD player to play it on. And if anyone's ever used like a Sony Discman, they are horrible. Like, do you remember those? So anyone who knows what a Walkman is with cassettes, imagine that, but with CDs. And anytime like you'd bump it, it would skip. Oh, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Um, but
Sorry.
they've always it's all right. They've always said Big Finish, like, if you want more stories, just being straight up with it, then they need people to buy what's out there. And some say, oh, that sounds really greedy, but I don't think so. I think
Oh
it's
no,
just
no,
being
no, at
honest.
all.
If they
Yeah,
don't have the money to hire actors or hire studio space or whatever it is, then they can't make and you know what the Doctor Who fandom's like. If they
oh
stop
yeah.
tomorrow, people would say, well, why are they stopping? They've got all these, and it's like, and I think that's a
It's,
problem, not
I
just in Who
think,
fandom, it's in all fandoms where
yeah,
fans complain about X, company explains reason why X is happening, fans ignore it. Then if X happens or goes away, like the fans originally wanted, fans then complain about X going away, and companies
mm,
like, well, we said this, and then do you know what I mean? It always seems to be this never end, and I think
it's
social media has exacerbated it as well.
it's
Like there's
strange. I mean, the whole. I mean, at the current time of recording, Twitter is currently in flames.
yeah,
Everything's
it's in
just,
meltdown. Yeah,
pardon my French, but it's just got to shit, to be honest. All of it just has
yeah,
gone completely just off the rails. I mean, everyone's having to go at each other.
yeah.
Everyone's dissecting every single word of every single interview, which in some cases, I think today's discussion on Twitter,
Mm,
it needed to be discussed. And
yeah.
I'm not gonna stand there and say people if people feel the need to be if people don't like a creative decision, they can be vocal about it. Of course they can. I mean, everyone has every right to be about it, but don't I think what I've noticed is there's an increase in death threats recently, which is
Mm.
insane. Because one of my friends got a death threat. Jack Alexander
Oh
got a
yeah.
death threat recently.
Uh,
Don't send death threats. Anyone watching? I doubt
no,
anyone
don't
watching
do
would
that.
send death threats, but it's just
It,
appalling.
it's I think what I think the problem is, like you're saying, discussions need to be had about things, and like
Mm.
it's all well and good hearing people out, but I think the problem with social media is it's so often and so very quickly goes from being about a discussion about something to being very personal,
Yeah.
and like I say, very nasty. Whereas in person, I've chatted with people in physical, either like this or like
Mm.
standing next to each other, where we'll talk about something, like say Doctor Who, and we won't agree on something. Like I might
Yeah.
say I really like this story, and someone says, "Oh no, I hate it." And I'm like, oh, that's fair enough. I was like, well, what don't you like about it? I'm not then gonna go, oh, like you're part of my French, you say, but I'm not gonna go, oh, you're a piece of shit, and like, how dare you? Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of these people going back and forth on Twitter, if they were physically next to each other, they might still disagree, but I
But they
don't
wouldn't
think it
be
would get to
so.
the yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think people.
See,
Well, if you make a death threat in someone in pub, well, one, that's very rude and that's dangerous as
yeah.
well. But it's also just awkward. It's like, all
Now
right,
I'm
well, where
just
do you go from here?
I'm just
Like,
imagining like a punch up in a bar with like everyone like dressed in doctor costumes with
God, the
like
nerdiest bust up ever.
yeah. I mean it'd be it'd be interesting to see kind of in person kind of not everyone on Twitter, but obviously just I
Yeah.
think the closest I've gotten to kind of getting into a Twitter level argument in well, kind of seeing that level of Twitter in person
Mm,
is I was at a convention once, I think it was LFCC, and someone walked up to us. I was with Joseph Sorrell at the time. Great guy, great friend, brilliant,
mm,
brilliant cosplayer. He was dressed in the Fifth Doctor outfit, I believe. And someone randomly walked up to us. So I was dressed as my fan doctor costume because
Yeah.
that's my niche when I go to Comic Cons. Means I don't get recognized as much as people wearing official outfits, but it's sort of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
I mean, especially in like photo shoots like this one, it's nice wearing my outfit.
Absolutely, yeah. It's your own thing.
Yeah, but he kind of is guessed that I was dressed as Doctor. When he asked first, he said,
Mm.
well, what are you guys dressed as? I can tell they're dressed as Doctor, and I said, oh well, it's kind of my niche, kind of my Doctor, you know. And then he started going on about the current state of the show, and
Mm.
he said, "Oh, well, I gave up after Smith, and I
Mm.
didn't care for Capaldi much. He was an old man, and I didn't care." And then he started going on about how woke the current era is, and me
Right,
and
yeah.
Joseph are just there like, "What do we do in this situation? We weren't prepared for this." He said, "Oh, yes, yeah, oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, I
walked
think
off,
the
and then
best thing in that situation, if someone's that vocal and like they're very like, oh, it's all woke and it's all this, like I've just sort of gone, all right, you know,
mm,
if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Because
yeah.
I mean, the whole, like you're saying, debates can be had, but I think like if I'm gonna debate someone, I've got to be in the right mindset for it.
I think
And
when it comes to the word woke, especially, I mean, that word infuriates me. It's genuinely like one of the, in how it's been kind of bastardized and taken, and in how it's used now, it's absolutely horrible. I mean, for one, and it's interesting asking people what they mean by that,
yeah.
because in certain contexts, it's just a person of color in a role, or a woman in a role, or
Mm,
anyone that isn't a white man in a role,
yeah.
and that'll be woke. But then they'll say they're not racist, they'll say they're not sexist or homophobic or transphobic, and
The
then they'll
the
say it's woke.
the red flag phrase everyone should watch out for is when someone goes, "I'm not a racist, but." The mid
Yeah.
or anything, replace racist with anything. If it's I'm not an X, but
Mm.
that's when you know,
That's
okay.
like, yeah. Maybe I should
It's
be
just
stepping away from this conversation.
I mean, a few years ago, like I'm so glad I didn't have Twitter when I was like 14, 15, because I
Yeah.
think, especially, you know, when you're a teen and you're getting in social media, I think that's a time when people are like more hyped up to, you know, slam their keyboards in heated arguments with people they don't know.
Yeah, I
Whereas
think
now I don't really engage in much Twitter discourse anymore. I see it and I'm like, is it worth, not saying it's not a worthy discussion to be had, but I'm like, for me personally at this moment, is it worth like my time and energy to weigh in
it's
on this? And yeah,
that's the thing with being 14 and 15 on Twitter. I mean, thankfully I didn't have Twitter then. But it corrupts people. I mean, say a 14 or 15-year-old got into the wrong group,
yeah,
uh, at that age, you absorb everything like a sponge. So
yeah,
I imagine
exactly.
that's how they, and not my doctors, are kind of created. How all of that group are kind of created is that they kind of, it probably started with like, um, everyone on kind of Tumblr or Twitter, talking about Capaldi because he's
Mm.
old. They're gonna stop watching this show, and they've ruined it.
Such
And
a
they've
stupid discourse, though, isn't
and it was
it?
probably like all of those like 14 and 15-year-olds that kind of got sucked into that sort of group have now grown up to be not my doctors, and very vocal about who can play a role and who can't, etc., etc. And it just
Yeah.
goes further downhill from there. And
I think
yeah,
Yeah, I just think on the whole, though, with Doctor Who especially, I just try and focus on like my own experience now. Like, just like,
yeah,
am I having fun? Am I enjoying it?
mm,
And
I
because
think
when Matt Smith's era was on, that was when I was going through like those tricky teen years, if you like. And I used to be, well, I was so critical of the Smith era. I mean, I still maintain to this day I've rewatched a lot of it, and there's still a lot of it I feel like I don't connect with, just
that's
personally. It's
fair.
just not for me. But at the time, I went through that age of like looking for criticisms because
Mm,
I was watching like YouTube and internet reviewers were the thing. So I guess it was like,
yeah,
oh, I'm gonna do what they do and like look for flaws.
mm,
And then when I did it less in Capaldi's time, partly because I love Capaldi so much as an actor. But then when it got to Jodie's, I was like, I'm not even gonna like. I just want to watch it. I just
yeah,
want to watch it. and I started having so much fun. And for me, series 11, I know that turned a lot of people off for
Mm,
various reasons.
mm,
But for me, it was almost like I was coming to Doctor Who anew again. Like I was
mm.
having so much fun watching this show that by that point, I'd been watching it for 13 years. It wasn't a new show, but it felt new. It felt exciting. It was fun. And I do reviews since on YouTube of story, but even now when I watch, I'll make notes, but I'm not like looking, I'm not
Mm.
looking for flaws. I'm not looking for, oh, I'm
I think,
gonna rag on that. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think the thing with me that kind of got me into that kind of culture wasn't Smith in particular. It was Clara. Clara. Because of course everyone on the internet back then was very negative about Clara.
It was
Um
everyone but me.
mm,
I was like, leave Clara, that famous video, leave Britney alone. That was me, but going, leave Clara alone.
and I must have been around 10 when she joined the show because born in 2003,
Mm.
wait, 11 maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And so, by the time she kind of left. What year was that? What year did she leave?
2015 she left. Yeah.
2015. Oh, so I wasn't too young then, but I was old enough to kind of be on YouTube and have a look and
Yeah.
see what people are thinking about the current series and Clara. And everyone was so overly negative about her character just because
Yeah.
I think it was because she was on the show for so long that people
Yeah.
were getting a bit tired. But now I love Clara. I love her character.
Yeah.
I
I know the common criticism is, oh, she get mate is like too important, or
mm,
she's too like the Doctor. And I always kind of like that though, because obviously that's where, especially in Capaldi's time, it gets more toxic, doesn't it? And that's exactly
mm,
what. And I think that was such an
yeah.
interesting idea to explore. Like we've always
Oh,
seen the
definitely.
Doctor can do a lot of good for his companions, but what if that good spills over into being detrimental? What if they want to,
Yeah.
like Clara did, be too much like him? What if it and Hell Bent, I mean, I remember, oh God, when Hell Bent went out,
God,
oh
everyone and
dear
their
me.
mother was complaining
Like I
about
wasn't
that.
on Twitter, but like I say on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever, everyone was like, what was
Mm.
that? That was terrible, especially after Heaven Sent as well, which was like universally loved.
Like one of the best
But
episodes of all time.
absolutely, but even from broadcast, I loved Hellbent. I thought it was a
Mm,
like bringing back Gallifrey and the Time Lords and this, like how far the Doctor was willing to go. Like yes, there's all like there's like paradoxical stuff, and
mm.
again like, oh, why did he go all that way to save Clara and not anyone else? I'm like, yeah, if you can look into, I'm
I
not
mean,
denying that, you can look into the wider spectrum of that, but I feel in that
in
moment, in that story, it
mm,
was exactly the right thing to do.
in retrospect, yeah, I do appreciate how Bent for what it is. It's not one of my favorites, definitely not one of my favorites. But looking back on it, it is understandable. Even like looking back at Clara's arc, it is understandable why he chose to save Clara. I mean, she was there all the important points of his life, really. Like
Yeah.
going into his time stream. She gave him she gave him that talk in when he was a child in the barn. She persuaded him not to push the moment, not to
Yes.
not to end the time war in such a brutal way. I mean, she influenced him in so many different ways. Of course, you
Mm.
could go back and save anyone. I mean, but even in the context of the story, he's just spent 4 billion years grieving for her,
Yeah.
which is, I think the reason people don't really see that is because that is such an incomprehensible number, is
Yeah.
because you
But
can't imagine that, but that makes
mm,
it even, to me at least, it makes it even more kind of unfathomably painful for the character to go through.
yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic. And I mean, I think it's even in the time, it's called Hell Bent. Sometimes people are like, I always say, the moment where he shoots what's he called? Like the commander,
Mm,
and where he wields the gun and all that. And
yeah.
everyone says, oh, that's so undoctorish, like downing another Time Lord to trigger their regeneration. And I'm like, well, we all have moments in life. I'm not saying to the point where we kill someone, not advocating that, don't do that. But, we all have moments in life where we see red and like all we can think about is like how angry we are, whatever it is. Like someone might have upset you, someone might have hurt you. And you just like, you feel it, like your whole body, you just feel like this rage and like that you can't. No
Mm,
one, nothing anyone says to you is going to stop, like, is going to stop you feeling that
yeah.
in that moment. And I've always thought that was, that whole story, like you're saying, it's been 4 billion years, and he's going to any length. He's seeing red. He doesn't care. Like in that moment, like the Doctor, yes, generally doesn't like kill anyone purposely, but I always think that just shows, like you're saying, how important Clara is to him. That in that
Mm,
moment, regardless of anything, he's not thinking about any other companion. He's not thinking about anything. He's just like, I'm gonna save Clara, and if you get in my way, I about my language, but I will fucking kill you. Like that's how I interpreted it. So
yeah,
for me,
yeah,
like him downing the Time Lord made sense. But you know what I mean? I sort of got where that was
um,
coming from.
yeah,
Um,
and people saying that's undoctory. It's an interesting take to say that because I get where it's coming from
yeah,
with obviously I never would and all that and
yeah, and it being in cold blood technically and all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
So
but I mean tell that to the ogre on that Pertwee shot. I mean tell that
everyone
to
brings up the Ogron. I love it. But yeah, you're
tell
right.
that to
You're
like
right.
Omega in Arc of Infinity or the Centauran in Invasion of Time
Yeah,
or like
yeah, yeah,
everyone during the Time War. Never. I mean I get why a pre-Time War doctors were obviously against guns, but they used them if they needed to.
yeah,
Obviously, I get why after the Time War, the Doctor wouldn't want to use them anymore because of that and what happened during that war. But then,
yeah.
you know, um, being on
I think it.
I think being on Gallifrey again for an extent would kind of trigger something in him.
Yeah, and I
So-
but I think it shows an interesting progression of the character as a whole. Because, like you're
Mm.
saying, the Doctor for a lot of the classic series in particular, it's like the pacifist, the one who never carries a gun, and all the. I think it was Moffat, said, "Oh, the Doctor doesn't carry a weapon." They gave him a
Mm.
screwdriver and all that. So, and yeah, at the heart of it, I agree absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I think like one moment I always remember because it was one of the first classic stories I watched as a kid, Resurrection of the Daleks during Peter
Mm.
Davison's time. There's a scene for anyone who doesn't know where he says he's going to kill Davros
I
because
bloody love that scene.
he
It's
can't let him escape. And the way, as you're saying, the way he plays it, it's so like understated. And when he says it to the people in the TARDIS, he's very understated, very underplayed. And then when he goes to it, there are moments where you think he's going to do it because Davros is like pushing him. And but yeah, at that point in his overall life, like you're saying, that is a time when the Doctor cannot bring himself to murder someone in cold blood just like
mm.
that. But then you get moments like Remembrance of the Daleks, where again the Seventh Doctor's more of this master manipulator who maybe
Yeah.
tries to always do it in a good way. But if Davros and the Daleks and Skaro have to fall, then
Mm.
so be it. And then,
Maybe
like you're saying, you've got the Time War, and
yeah.
Eccleston's a bit rough on the edge. David Tennant really wants to, like, say, I never would. He
I mean
really wants to
even
break away.
even that kind of progressed into the Time Lord Victorious,
Yes,
which
yeah,
was sort of the that kind of walked so well they kind of ran so Hellbent could run. I mean I
yes,
mean you can't really hate the Doctor's actions in Hellbent and then rave about how much you love the Seventh Doctor committing genocide a few times.
yeah.
It's
I
kind of
just,
a double standard in a way.
I just think to round off on it, because I know I've been rattling about Hellbent for ages. I just think it's a perfect example of showing a post-Time War Doctor at their lowest.
Mm,
Like, this is a man who, as David Tennant, Matt Smith, whoever has like said, I went through some horrible shit, and I had to kill a lot of people, and I don't want to do it again. There you go. Okay, I get that. Fair enough. But as I say, when you see Red, when he's seeing nothing but anger, when all he wants to do is save Clara, and he doesn't, like, that's all. That's it.
mm,
Like, I think him shooting down that Time Lord is probably one of his lowest post-war Time War moments. Like
yeah.
everything he's done, like Day of the Doctor, it's such a triumphant ending. It's like, we didn't have to use the moment and all that sort of stuff. But then I think it shows that the Doctor as a character is still fallible. Like they're not
Mm,
perfect. Like they will have
yeah.
moments of like an emotional moment where they will betray what they stand
Mm,
for. I think doing that on the occasion is perfectly valid. I
mm,
think, yeah, if it was happening every week, I'd be like, okay, this is we're getting a bit uh we're
yeah.
getting a bit thingy there. But I think,
I mean,
doing it in a hell
saying
bent
that
sort of
though,
way.
saying that though, I wouldn't mind a doctor that consistently kind of ascends further and further into chaos, and
Mm,
maybe even a Valiard sort of state.
yeah.
Maybe a situational type thing that just keeps on pushing him until he reaches kind of breaking point at the end of the season. That would be
Mm,
kind of interesting to me. I mean, Doctor just descends further into darkness as the season goes on. Kind of
yeah.
start more hero like, and then you kind of get to a moral gray area, and then you
Yeah.
just get to proper like rage and anger.
Yeah, because I think it's important to show to have a truly. I mean, the Doctor's three-dimensional character, of course, but I think if
Mm,
you want to truly get the most out of all those dimensions, why not
yeah.
show them having these moments where, or like you say, a slow descent,
Mm.
or
I
and
think
go on,
my
sorry.
my favorite example of them kind of making that three-dimensional kind of connections to character is in School Reunion, where he
Mm,
genuinely considers that offer from Mr. Finch for like to rule over the universe, to be a god. I
yeah,
think that is probably one of my favorite moments for 10 even, when he is genuinely considering bringing his people back, ending the war,
yeah,
living with Sarah and Rose and everyone forever, and it takes Sarah convincing him otherwise. I think that that is also kind of the inverse of Genesis as well, actually, when it's
yes,
Sarah who's trying to convince him to do something godlike.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
that's a whole different tangent though, but yeah, I think it
yeah.
is interesting to make. I'd much rather have an episode like Hellbent if we get a three-dimensional Doctor than
Mm.
anything else. Honestly, that's my view on
Absolutely.
this.
Like, whilst yes, it is great to see the Doctor like do the right thing in impossible situations. Like, it's one of the hopeful things of the show. I just think every now and then it's all right to show them not doing that, whether
Mm,
that's by choice or because there is no other choice. Do you know what I mean? I think
yeah.
the show to dip its toes into it every now and then isn't a bad thing. It's not a dirty word, and I don't like we got to the crux of it, the Doctor shooting down the Time Lord in Hellbent and saying it's very undoctory. It's like I'd argue, like, yeah, on the whole it is like is like a contradiction to their
Mm,
morals, but I'd always argue in that moment and the build up to that moment, it makes sense.
yeah. So, the next thing I kind of want to discuss is a series on your channel called Weird Who. Which of course, I've got a Doctor Emu story that I've written that I sent you.
You
I just
do.
wanted to, discuss that with you because it's an interesting series that kind of goes into the oddities of Doctor Who that I highly recommend everyone watching checks out. I just wondered what's kind of the weirdest thing you've kind of found so far in your view, and
Oh,
yeah.
the weirdest weird who, as it were.
Mm,
Well, I mean, I started the series because there's, with the franchise as huge as Doc, like random weird stuff out there, isn't there? Like stuff that
mm,
the BBC often didn't even have a hand in. They these were got made sometimes unofficially, and I'm just looking at the eight I've done so far. Um, I mean, the first one, Gay
mm.
Daleks. I mean, oh, what? That's a late 90s. Now, I saw that probably when I was way too young. It gets like shared at school, like, haha, watch this. All I'll say for anyone who's curious, it's very dated, it's very stereotypical. Some might
Yeah.
argue homophobic as well in some respects, but it was made in, I think, 1997, 98. That's weird. The weirdest thing so far. Do you know what? It was probably it's one of the shorter ones, but it was the Dalek shaver advert, which I had no
Ah.
idea. So in the 60s, there was this brand I think called Remington who made shavers, and in the 60s, when Dalek Mania was like big, it was
Oh
everywhere.
yeah.
They
Peaks
wanted
then.
to advertise one of their new electric shavers with a Dalek voice being like the shaver. So it wasn't a Dalek, but it was the shaver talking, but the shaver sounded exactly like a Dalek. And it's just so weird, like, because the advert exists amazingly. You can find it on YouTube, and there's this shaver, and the familiar Peter Hawkins voice going, "I am the Remington shaver." It's very weird, but I don't know. There's a charm to it. It's that
Mm.
classic British charm of like, oh, it's a Dalek voice being a razor, and the bit that always gets me in the advert is I think he talks. There's a bit where it mentions about like putting it away or something or keeping it clean,
Yeah.
and there's a hand obviously holding the shaver that does that. And when he finishes cleaning it, it just goes, "Thank you." So it just makes me laugh. So I mean, yeah, I mean you can check the Weird Who, but I mean that it's on YouTube. That advert, if you just type in Dalek Remington shaver. But the
Mm.
controversy behind that is it wasn't authorized by Terry Nation.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
I think it was by
interesting.
Terry Nation. I can't remember the ins and outs of it. It is in the video. I
Yeah.
do describe it, but by the obviously it had gone out, and then they had to pull it because by the time Terry Nation's agent or lawyer found out about it, she was like, "Hey, we didn't authorize this, or like we
Yeah.
hadn't finished discussions or whatever." But
I mean,
and there's a lot of that.
it's
The
funny how
gay
much has
Daleks
happened.
thing
Yeah.
that got into conflict with
Yeah, I
Terry
can't
Nation Estate,
remember.
I think, as well.
Can't remember which movie it was, but I believe there was a Dalek cameo. I can't remember if it was a parody movie, but it was like there was a xenomorph there as well, and like it had all
Oh,
these sci-fi.
was it by any chance Looney Tunes back in action?
That's the one. That's
See,
the
I
one.
loved. Everyone hates it, but I loved that film. It was basically Warner Brothers doing like, "Hey, Who Framed Roger Rabbit's a good movie. Let's do
Mm.
that." So,
Yeah, and I mean, apparently they didn't have the rights to the Daleks for that either. They just threw the props in. So
yeah,
it
it's
does happen quite a lot.
it does, and there's other oddities as well, like the Doctor Who Square CD is another
Mm.
one that's a favorite. If you have the Square CD, be careful what player you try it in because it's probably going to destroy it.
Mm.
Whoever thought Square CDs were a good idea. And there's such a funny clip of that because whenever I make these, I try and find as much like video
Yeah,
as
yeah.
possible. And with the Square CD, I was like, there's probably not going to be, this was released at a time when Doctor Who
Mm.
it was coming to the end in the classic series, like we're talking 1989, 1990.
Mm.
And so I thought, well, there's not going to be like an advert for this. I thought, oh, maybe it'll be on like, I don't know, a show talking about Doctor Who. And it's this weird, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like almost this music show. And there's just there's the host, the guy promoting the CD, and a bunch of people just surrounding him. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's this Square CD. Like, is there anything good on it? And the guy promoting it goes, no. It's like very much, I'm like, what is this? It's so weird. But yeah, no, I do enjoy making Weird Who. The only
Mm.
downside is I like finding stuff that's like more niche because like let's face it,
Yeah.
Doctor Who fan, there's always that one Doctor Who fan who goes, I knew about this, and that's fair
Mm.
enough, some people do, but I try
Yeah.
not to go for the obvious things like say
I
I
mean,
don't know.
I absolutely love looking into niche Doctor Who. It's like a hobby. It's like I mean, I say a hobby. It's like a lot of my time.
Yeah.
I love looking into the niche side of things. But even I didn't know about Doctor Emu or Doctor Eyes or even the Gay
Yes.
Daleks. I had no idea about any of the Weird Who things that you've done apart from Dimension in Time, of course.
Oh, the
Uh,
weirdest.
Yes, of course, the weirdest of the weird, and the Prime Computer ads. I knew about
Oh
that.
yes, yeah.
But I actually showed Dimensions in Time to one of my flatmates the other day.
Yeah.
One who had watched Doctor Who, had
Yeah.
watched Torchwood, but hadn't watched Classic Who. So
Ah.
what I've shown him thus far is the Curse of Fatal Death and Dimensions in Time, which
You
I
went
think.
straight for the parodies.
Ah, yes. And I showed him Dimensions in Time, and then afterwards I asked them what was the plot, and they had absolutely no fucking clue. They had no idea. I think that's the joy of it, really. I know there are certain people on Twitter that love that story. And
Yes.
Jenny, I'm looking at you.
Yes.
And I fully respect that, and I love that story as well, just because there is no story. There is no
Yeah.
story there, and I love it for it. I think it's just, I think, and there's so many oddities within that, like the production of that alone. I
Oh
mean,
God. Yeah.
Tom Baker wanting a bullet hole in his head was weird enough. That's
Classic Tom.
classic Tom. Nobody understands what is going through that man's head apart from a bullet in that scene, apparently.
Oh,
Um,
but we love him for it at the
oh yeah,
same
oh
time.
yeah.
I think those early 90s, like I've seen some convention clips of him from that period, and that just seems to be where he's at his most eccentric, I think,
Mm, yeah,
which is
yeah, for
great.
sure. But I mean, I absolutely love the use of dustbins. in Doctor Who parodies because it's very common when it comes to
Yes.
the Daleks. And I mean, I can see why it's common. It's unusually common nonetheless, but yeah, I mean, it's obvious. It's obviously the go-to with the Daleks. I mean, I've Little Pepper Pots, but I haven't really seen that.
Yeah. Yeah, there
Yeah.
are a few more from that era. There's a skit that a group, well, an act known as the Crankies do, and the
Mm,
Cranky. I don't know much about them, but one of the it's like a small Scottish duo.
mm,
And I heard about them before. My parents were sort of like, oh, we weren't fans of it. It seemed, it was a very Marmite thing. You either liked it or you didn't. And I think it's called Doctor Y, the skit. Haha, how original.
yeah.
Yeah, never heard that one before.
Mm,
But yeah, it's like a plot about them going to like some sort of cheaply made alien planet
mm,
to sort out time or something, and the main villain, quote unquote, is wearing a Gallifreyan robe, which is
yeah.
really weird. So borrowing props, but it's always deciding what to, because I don't just jump for anything. Because I watched that and I found it a bit boring, to be honest, and a bit
Mm,
grating. I just don't think the style of that show is for me. And I
yeah.
always try, not just with Weird Who, just with YouTube in general, because you get comments of people saying, "Oh, like review this or talk about this or why don't you mention
Mm,
this?" And I always check them out. I never ignore them, but there are some things I want. And I think if I'm not enthused about talking about it, then what's the
yeah.
point? Because I'm going
Exactly.
to sit here and go, "Oh yeah, look, it's a cheap alien planet.
I
Oh
mean,
wow,
uh,
it's look at that." It's like what? Who want? No one's going to watch that.
no one's
Why
gonna
would
watch
you
that. I
watch
mean,
that?
that's the thing with content creators in general, and um, fan audios, fan doctors, any type of content,
Hmm.
is that we do it for fun. At the end of the
Exactly.
day, that's
Yeah.
why we do it. I mean, I've pretty much said this on every episode of this podcast so far since Gary Russell joined and asked me why I do this.
Yeah.
Um, and the main thing that I took away from that is that I do this for fun. I don't. It's not, of course, this can go to my portfolio. It
Yeah.
can, it
Yeah.
can, it can very much give me a boost here and there,
Yeah.
but I'm not doing it for that. Of course, that's a benefit. Of course, I'm benefiting from that, but I do it for fun because I
Yeah.
enjoy it. Because even if I'm wearing my fan doctor outfit to a convention, it's nice going around in something that I've put together. And even
Yeah.
if when I get around to filming more of the fan film, I think people create fan films because they want to wear silly costumes and say I'm the doctor and stuff like
Exactly.
that. And it's the same with content creators of all kinds. Really, we do it because we just want to have fun. And if we're
Yeah.
not infused about the content we make, then what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the
It's a
point?
labor of love, isn't it? It's
Mm.
absolutely a labor of love.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of where my next question leads to, which is something that I always ask to every guest who comes on this show. It's more about how you kind of describe your creative process, when it comes to stuff like acting, and
Mm.
content creation,
Yeah.
and just you going a bit in depth into your creative process when it comes to those things.
Well, with acting, I mean, where do you start with acting? I think when I came out of drama school, as I think people should, like, you should be open to doing anything, obviously anything within reason, but you know what I
Mm,
mean, like whether
yeah.
it's work in the theater or film or even doing like touring around schools, doing
Mm,
educational stuff. I knew so many people who they say, "Oh, you're doing school," they sort of like turn their noses up at it, but I always thought,
yeah.
well, you're delivering an important message, but you're also giving kids often their first experience of theatre. The amount of kids we did shows for who were like not young, I'm talking like 13, 14, 15, who come up afterwards and say, "Oh, that was really wicked. Like I've never seen theatre before." Because it's getting so hard. So, I think
Mm,
I just try I was like taking everything. Now I'm a bit older. I try and go for stuff that I'm interested in. Again, it's that if I read a job description and I'm not enthused about it, what if I apply, my application's not going to look or read as me being enthusiastic, is it? Or if
yeah.
I fake it, the minute I go in that room, it's going to be obvious.
Yeah.
So I try and go for stuff I find interesting. And then when you get a part, I think it's just my process is just, reading the script several times,
Mm,
figure out the nuts and bolts, come with a lot of ideas. I'd say that don't just go in and wing it. That
yeah.
is the worst thing anyone could do, I think. But no, just come with ideas because don't be afraid to share them. Directors, other actors, they want to hear what you've got to bring to the table. What any good
Mm,
actor or director worth their salt, I think. So yeah, I just try and come with a lot of ideas. And then for content creation, I think the reason why I'm still doing it 10 years after making this channel is because I still see it as a hobby.
Mm,
I've tried my damnedest not to say to myself, this is a job.
yeah.
Yes, I earn a bit of money from it, which I'm very grateful for. Never say I wouldn't be, but I'm when people say, "Oh, so you do YouTube as a job?" Then I go, "No, it's a hobby." Because I think if I started seeing YouTube like a job, right, I have to get content out this regularly, I have to do this, I have to do that, then it's not going to be fun because, people get burned out, they get frustrated with themselves if they miss deadlines that they've imposed on them. Do you know what I mean? If I've
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
freedom to do like make content when I like what I like, then I'm going to do it. And I know full well that there are some videos on my channel that aren't going to do as well as others. Like I know
Mm,
that. And yeah, I could just not make them, but I want to make them. I want to talk
yeah.
about, whether it's the latest Doctor Who episode, or I want to
Mm,
talk about idents or TV history, or I don't know
exactly.
now anything. And I just think, yeah, if you want to do YouTube as your job, if you're going into this being like this is going to be my full-time job, fair enough, do whatever you want.
Mm,
But I think if you want to have a good time doing it, I found anyway, just treat it as a hobby. Always treat, even if you're earning a bit
exactly.
from it or whatever, just try and treat it as a hobby because I think the content you're enthused about making comes across.
Oh yeah, definitely,
I've seen a
definitely.
lot of channels, some channels I don't know, personally or anything, but you watch them and say they're covering, I don't know, like, like trends or drama or news or whatever, not just in fandoms, in anything. um, you can always tell what they're genuinely excited about talking about. Like, right, guys, like we've got to really talk about this. Like, this is mate. Do you know what I mean? You'll hear it, and then stuff that they feel like they have to talk about, they'll
Mm,
just be like, "Oh yeah," and this happened, and do you know what I mean? I try not
yeah.
to fall into that trap if I can help. I probably have done it. In 10 years, I've probably
Yeah, I
done
think
that,
every
but
content creator's done that. But I think that comes across in every content as well, that kind of attitude. I mean, it's the
yeah,
same thing. If you're trying to make a fan film to be like the official show, or like
mm,
to be the official show, which you're
yeah,
never gonna be, fan films are not official in any
yeah,
capacity. And if you're trying to match it up to the official show, if you're trying to beat them, you're not having fun. You're just
no,
trying to one up
yep,
the official showrunners, which is not what you should do.
nope,
That's when you're jumping too close to the limelight, and then you get into trouble because
yeah,
then you're. I mean, that's not saying you can't have fancy effects and everything, but
oh,
if you're
absolutely,
trying like there's a level of I don't really know how to describe it. I've discussed it with other fan film and fan audio creators on here, but there's a level. It's mainly to do with money and everything, where
mm,
you can make a really well made fan film, really well budgeted, but there is a level of if you're trying to write like the official show, if you're trying to emulate it too
yeah,
much, then it and you're treating it too much like a business and
sure.
or job, then it becomes less about passion and more about pumping them out as much as possible and trying to emulate and over. I think that's the same with everything, fan audios, fan content of any kind. If you lose that passion, you start treating it like a business. You start treating it like a proper like job. Um,
Mm.
and I'm not. There are certain. I mean, there are certain audio creators I know who treat it more like a job, but they're not primarily just about Doctor Who. That's the
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
even if it is about Doctor Who, it's more about just having fun at the end of the day. I mean, even
yeah.
the people, even like I see people treating it like a job and having fun at the same time, which is nice. See that, but even so, don't, I see what you're saying about treating content creation like a hobby. And one other thing you mentioned was burnout, which is another
Yes.
question I love asking people on this show: is how do you kind of deal with burnout?
Oh, well, in terms of, I haven't really felt it in acting yet because I've never been in that very lucky position that so few actors are in, where they literally bounce from one job to the next, to the next, to the next,
Mhm.
straight away. So I've always been, I think I've been steady with that. But YouTube, there was probably, I think there was two times where I felt, sorry. First time was 2018. I was a lot smaller than channel wise. I think I had about 2,000 subscribers, and I think that was the first time I felt like my head was trying to make this feel more like a job. I felt
Yeah.
like I was running certain shows, and I was like, right, this has to go out on a Friday. This has to go. Do you know what I mean? I was becoming too rigid, and that combined with acting, combined with real life, like other jobs and all that, it just got too much. So I took a month or so off, and then reverted to like the hobby style, and then the pandemic was one, funnily enough, because naturally when we all got locked down, it was like, right, well, I've got a lot of time, and I did daily uploads for a lot
Yeah.
longer than I should have. I did it, oh god, for about 6 months, 7 months, which doesn't sound
Wow.
like a long time, but if
That
you're
is a
out
long
there,
time.
trust me, daily content for 6 to 7 months is a
Jesus.
is a very long time. And but it started up that way just because I like releasing one video a day. I was never much of a fan of doing like two in a day or whatever. So it just became that way because I was filming so much. I was like, well, it's just going to go out every day. And then I stopped doing it because again, I felt like, well, I was burned out generally. I think from lockdown, from the pandemic, and then because we were going into lockdown two, then I think,
Mm,
and yeah, I scaled back. I didn't stop, but I scaled back. And then the
yeah.
third time was the start of this year, probably. Um, I'd I still made videos, but less frequently. Just when I wanted to. I think that's and the best way. Sorry, I'm long-winded answer to your question.
Oh, no, no,
But
by all
how do I
means.
deal with burnout? If I do feel burned out, I think there's nothing wrong with taking a step back. I
Yeah.
think there's a big on this or any content creation platform, like if you have even so much as like a week off, like you're done. Like you're not coming back. The audience ain't gonna be there. Do you know what I mean? It's that fear, that stigma. And I'm sure that does happen for certain types of like content or channels
Mm,
or whatever. But I think you've just got to have faith. If you've built an audience, no matter how small it is or how big it is,
yeah.
if you feel you've got that connection, that like loyalty. Well, it's not even loyalty, but just that connection. If you feel you've got a
Mm,
rapport, then they'll wait for you. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I
exactly.
one series I did, the history of Doctor Who viewing figures. There was a
Mm,
10-month gap between the end of the classic series and me doing an episode about the wilderness years, and I'd get comments for months, people being like, "When's it coming back? When's it coming back?" Which is fair enough. But then if I'd answer that in videos, you're saying just whenever I feel like in the right mindset, when I want to bring it back, there'd be those people going like, yeah, like no worries, like take your
mm.
time. I've got massive respect for another creator that we're both familiar with, Clever Dick Films, Richard over there. Obviously he's got his life, a job, etc.
Mm.
And he spends a great deal of time working on his content, like his Doctor Who retrospectives,
Oh, yeah.
which we all
Yeah.
we all love. But I think because we understand the work behind it and they are such of a quality, we're willing to wait. Like
Mm,
I think between his David Tennant and Matt Smith one, it's either been a year or nearly a year.
yeah.
But no
Yeah.
one, no one minds because it's like we
Because it's
know
great
he's going to
content.
put the quality. I think that
Exactly.
fear of like, oh, no one's going to watch. I think if those creators or those people who, like I say, it's all about the trends. It's all about being quick, and we've got to pump it out. We've got to pump it out. It's got to be timely. Got to be timely. I think they're the ones who probably will lose an order because yeah, people click on things because if it's news or trend, they want to get an instant sort of right. What's this about?
Mm,
But but I think those like Richard, like yourself as well, like people who put genuine time, effort, enthusiasm into content, they'll
mm.
wait for you. So if dealing
I
with
think,
burnout, just take a step back, do
yeah.
something else. I'd say have an internet break. Honestly,
Yeah.
completely have a break from the internet if you can.
I think, this year for me has been quite, at times, burnout's been huge for obvious reasons at the beginning of the year. Obviously,
Yeah,
life-changing incidents happened that obviously influenced stuff that I did throughout the year. But some of my bigger projects took months upon months upon months
yeah,
since yeah, that Doctor in Distress cover took
yes,
I think I came up with the idea in March and it released in September.
mm,
Um, and it didn't have to take that long, but it was just a matter of working with people and taking time off and probably like taking the time to get it right, get it
yeah,
perfect. I think even like discovering this series and what I wanted to do with this, I mean, I get these out quite consistently, quite fast, but it's because it's not, I put they're fun.
Yeah,
These type of videos are fun, and it's nice talking to people in the community such as yourself, and getting the chance to sit down and actually, because I see you occasionally at like time. I saw your time fracture,
did.
BFI,
Yeah,
and places like that. But in terms of sitting down and talking with you, I haven't had as much a chance yet. Unlike
yeah,
now, so it's nice to have this podcast. But I think the only worry as like an audio producer, because obviously I've had a huge burnout in terms of fan audios this year. Huge burnout. I've pretty much moved all of them to next year.
yeah,
Um, and the only worry with that really is upsetting people you work with. So like guest writers, etc. etc. At the end of the day, we're all human. We all have burnouts. We all need breaks here and there, and it can take
yes,
a long time to get an audio out, even if it seems like an easy one. If I don't want to push myself too hard to the point in which it's, and I know there are audio creators out there that really schedule their content. That's brilliant. That's amazing. I mean, the fact that they can get them out very consistently is incredible. But
yeah,
this year in particular for me has been a difficult one to do that and to
yeah,
push myself on. But it's a matter of taking a break, reevaluating my situation, finding content in the meantime that I find fun and very passionate that I will like to continue while doing audio
mm,
production, this podcast, Doctor Stress cover, etc., etc. It's a matter of I think once you stick to one thing, it can be great, but it's just not for
yeah,
me. I love branching out and doing other things as well. So I mean, even
yeah.
like it's not dependent on what does well or not. In my view, it's just a hobby.
Mm. That's
Um,
it. That should be the takeaway. It's just a
yeah,
hobby and have fun. Just have
yeah,
fun with it. If you're having fun, chances are the people who consume the content you make will have fun too.
exactly. And as I said, it's not dependent on what does well either. I mean, at the time of recording this, my Power of the Doctor Regeneration live reaction video has 95K views,
Nice.
almost at 100K, which is the most popular video before that was 3.5K views. So that's a huge leap. I don't think I'll ever beat 100K ever in my time on YouTube, but I'm okay with that because
Yeah, yeah,
at the end of the day, it's fun, it's a hobby, and even that video in itself, that 2 minute video of me just being very, very hyped and jumping out of my seat is very
yeah,
real and very much, just me being excited over something. And that's great. And I love that I got to share that with the world and I get to look back on that in future and think, wow, that was, yeah, that was brilliant episode. Like just a brilliant time to be a fan and just enjoy
yeah,
something. But yeah, it's a hobby. It's enjoyable, and you're right about burnout. I think that there are so many different ways to cover it, and every time I've asked that question, I've got a remotely different answer. Actually, everyone has their own way, but
mm.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. But
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah,
yeah, hmm, yeah, yeah, I think that's it really. If
cool.
you have anything to promote, go ahead.
Oh, plugging away. So I am on YouTube, Adam Martyn, that's Martin with a Y. So you can check me out there for all the various bits of content I make. I make content on Doctor Who, television history, a lot of the different things we've discussed here, so you can check that out. If you're into now, that's what I call music specifically. I have a second channel called AMTV now, which is all about that basically, so you can check that out as well. And if you want to follow us, then you can follow me on Twitter at Adam Martin AMTV for all my various ramblings and whatnot. So, yeah, that's and as we mentioned earlier, if you like myself and Philip Hawkins, we do the Everybody's Dead Dave podcast, which you can either listen to on places like Spotify, etc., or you can also listen to it on YouTube. Just type in Philip Hawkins and his channel will come up, and there it will be.
Well, all that will also be in the description if you want to immediately find it. And thank you for joining me today, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking to you about, well, everything
Uh,
really.
yes, no,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And for everyone watching, make sure to check out the next episode in which I'll be talking to Sophie Aldred, which is insane. Insanely wicked. That is. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, etc., etc., etc. And yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.